I've been with Mateus for almost 6 years, married for 3. His family is originally from Brazil and he grew up speaking Portuguese at home. I thought that was beautiful. I loved that he had this whole other culture and language, and I was excited to learn about it, maybe even learn the language eventually. The first time I met his family was about 4 months into dating. His mother Alice, his father Miguel, his sister Carolina, his brother Rodrigo. They all live within 20 minutes of each other in the same part of the city. Very close family, very involved in each other's lives. And from the first dinner, I could feel something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Alice would look at me and then look away like I was furniture. She'd ask Mateus questions about his life, and when I'd try to contribute, she'd just keep talking over me like I hadn't said anything. Carolina kept bringing up someone named Mariana and how much she missed her and how things weren't the same since she stopped coming around. Rodrigo barely acknowledged me at all. Miguel was the only one who made any effort, asking me where I grew up and what I liked to do. But even he seemed uncomfortable, like he was breaking some unspoken rule by being nice to me. After dinner, I asked Mateus who Mariana was. His ex-girlfriend. They dated for 4 years before me, and apparently the entire family loved her. Carolina and Mariana were best friends. Alice considered her a daughter. They were all devastated when Mateus broke up with her, and they made that very clear from day one that I was not a welcome replacement. I told Mateus how uncomfortable I felt, and he said I was reading too much into it. They were just getting used to someone new. Give it time. So I gave it time. A year passed, then 2. The behavior didn't change. It got worse. At family dinners, they would switch to Portuguese mid-conversation. Now look, I get that Portuguese is their first language, and it's natural for them to slip into it. I never expected them to speak English 100% of the time. But this was different. They would be speaking English, I would start participating, and then suddenly everyone would switch to Portuguese. They'd talk and laugh and look directly at me while laughing, and I'd just sit there like an idiot not understanding a single word. One time I asked Mateus what they were saying. He told me they were just talking about Carolina's vacation. Okay, fine. But then why did everyone look at me when they laughed? Why did Alice point at my plate while saying something that made Rodrigo snort? He said I was being paranoid. I tried to learn Portuguese. Downloaded Duolingo, bought a textbook, practiced every day. I was actually making progress until Carolina found out and said something to Alice. Next family dinner, Alice announced very loudly in English that she found it rude when outsiders tried to learn their family language, that it felt like an invasion of their privacy. She looked right at me when she said it. I stopped practicing after that. When we got engaged, Mateus wanted to have the engagement party at his parents' house. I agreed because I was still trying, still hoping things would get better. The party happened, and guess who showed up? Mariana. Carolina invited her. At my engagement party. To celebrate my upcoming marriage to her ex-boyfriend. Carolina said it wasn't a big deal because Mariana was still part of the family, even if she and Mateus weren't together anymore. Mateus said I was overreacting, and that Mariana was just being friendly by coming. Mariana was there for 4 hours. She brought a gift. She gave a toast. She talked about how much she loved the family and how she'd always be grateful for the years she spent with them. Alice cried and hugged her. I stood there holding my glass of wine, wanting to scream. Our wedding was beautiful. I planned almost everything myself because my mom passed when I was 22 and my dad isn't really in the picture. I had my best friend Kira as my maid of honor, and honestly, she was the only reason I survived the whole process. The ceremony was perfect. The reception was perfect. And then about a month later, I saw the photos that Alice had framed in her house. She had cropped me out of the wedding photos. I am not exaggerating. She took photos from my wedding and edited them so I wasn't visible. There was one of Mateus standing at the altar that originally had me walking toward him, and she cropped it so it was just him. There was a family photo where I was standing next to Mateus, and she literally cut the photo so only half of his body was showing, and I wasn't in frame at all. When I confronted her, she said she just wanted photos of her son, that there was nothing wrong with wanting pictures of her own child. When I told Mateus, he said his mom was just proud of him, and I shouldn't take it personally. I shouldn't take it personally. My mother-in-law cropped me out of my own wedding photos, and I shouldn't take it personally. That was year 1 of marriage. Year 2. Rodrigo still hadn't learned my name, and I don't mean he forgot it occasionally. I mean he refused to say it. He would call me her or that one or Matthias's wife, never my actual name. If he needed to get my attention, he would say hey or just snap his fingers in my direction. Snap his fingers, like I was a dog. I asked Mateus to talk to him about it. He said Rodrigo was just awkward and didn't mean anything by it. When I pushed harder, he got annoyed and said I was creating problems where there weren't any, that his family had accepted me and I needed to stop looking for reasons to be offended. His family had accepted me. Right. That's why Carolina invited Mariana to every holiday. Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, barbecue, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, every single one. Mariana was always there. Sometimes she'd show up alone, sometimes with a date, but she was always there. And everyone treated her like a beloved family member while I sat in the corner being ignored. I started dreading holidays. I would get physically tense for days before any family gathering. Kira kept telling me I needed to put my foot down, that this was insane, that no one should have to deal with this. But every time I tried to talk to Mateus about it, he would shut me down. I was too sensitive. I was making mountains out of molehills. His family loved me and I was being ungrateful. The thing is, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe I was the problem, because if I was the problem, then I could fix it. I could try harder, be nicer, do better. But if they were the problem, then there was nothing I could do. And my marriage was built on a foundation of people who would never accept me. So I kept trying. I brought gifts to every gathering. I complimented Alice's cooking even when she made a point of saying the recipes were family secrets she'd never share with outsiders. I asked Carolina about her life and listened to her talk about Mariana's new apartment and Mariana's promotion and Mariana's everything. I smiled when Rodrigo called me that one and didn't say anything. This went on for 3 years of marriage. 3 years. Then came this Thanksgiving. Mateus and I had talked about hosting at our place this year. I actually bought the house before we got married. Saved up for years for the down payment. My name is the only one on the deed. We'd hosted small dinners before, but never a full holiday. I was nervous, but also kind of excited because I thought maybe if I could show them I was a good host, a good wife, someone who could take care of their precious Mateus, maybe things would finally shift. We invited them for 4 in the afternoon. I spent 3 days preparing, made a turkey, 2 kinds of stuffing, homemade cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, 3 different pies. Kira came over the morning of to help me set up, and she kept saying she was proud of me for putting in so much effort even though they didn't deserve it. They showed up at noon, 4 hours early, all of them. Alice, Miguel, Carolina, Rodrigo, and of course Mariana. Because why would any holiday be complete without her? They just walked in like they owned the place. Alice immediately went to the kitchen and started criticizing how I was preparing the turkey. Said the temperature was wrong, the seasoning was off, that in Brazil they did it differently and better. She tried to take over, and when I said I had it handled, she gave me this look like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Carolina and Mariana sat in my living room talking about old times and how Mariana used to spend every Thanksgiving with the family and how much they missed those days. While I was in the kitchen, cooking for them, Rodrigo walked around my house looking at things and commenting in Portuguese to Miguel about the decor. I caught enough words to know he was making fun of the art on my walls. I kept it together. I told myself it was just a few hours and then they'd leave and I could decompress. Mateus was no help, just following his mom around agreeing with everything she said. At one point, she told him the potatoes would be better if she made them, and he said, "Great idea, May, let her take over." Dinner was tense. They spoke Portuguese most of the meal. I sat there eating my own food that I spent 3 days making while they had a conversation I couldn't understand. Mariana laughed at something Carolina said and looked directly at me while laughing. Alice kept piling food on Mateus's plate and saying things to him in Portuguese that made him smile. Then after dinner, when we were all sitting in the living room pretending to be a happy family, Alice stood up and made an announcement. She said in English, very clearly so I would understand, that she had some wonderful news. She said that she and Miguel had decided she was going to move in with us starting next month. That Mateus clearly needed help around the house since his wife, she said, wife like it was a dirty word, couldn't take care of him properly. That she would handle the cooking and cleaning and make sure her son was being treated the way he deserved. Everyone laughed. Carolina clapped. Rodrigo said it was about time. Mariana smiled and said Alice would whip this place into shape. And Mateus, my husband, the man I married, he smiled and nodded. I looked at him and asked if he knew about this. He shrugged and said his mom needed help and we had the space. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like I was crazy for even questioning it. I asked him when exactly he was planning to tell me that his mother was moving into my house. He said he was going to talk to me about it, but his mom wanted to announce it herself. He said it like that made it better. Something shifted in me at that moment. I looked around the room at all of them sitting in my house on my furniture eating the food I made, and I realized that nothing was ever going to change. I had spent 5 years trying to earn their approval, and they had spent 5 years making it clear I would never get it. And now they wanted to move into my home and push me out of my own life. I stood up very calmly and pulled out my phone. I looked up locksmiths and found one that did emergency services. I called them right there in the living room on speaker. I said I needed every lock in my house changed tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. The person on the phone confirmed the appointment. Alice started laughing and saying I couldn't kick out family. I told her this was my house, my name on the deed, my down payment. None of them lived here. Then I looked at Mateus and said, neither do you anymore. Alice's face went from smug to shocked in about half a second. Carolina stood up and started yelling at me in Portuguese. Rodrigo called me a crazy American. Mariana just sat there with her mouth open. Mateus tried to talk to me, saying I was being dramatic and we should discuss this privately. I said there was nothing to discuss. He made a decision about my house without consulting me. He let his family disrespect me for 5 years and never once stood up for me. He invited his ex-girlfriend to every family event and expected me to just accept it. And now he thought his mother was going to move in and take over my home? I told them all to leave. Alice refused. She said she wasn't going anywhere until we sorted this out. I said fine, and I walked to the front door and opened it. I stood there holding it open and waited. Miguel was the first one to move. He grabbed Alice's arm and said they should go. She tried to argue, but he pulled her toward the door. Carolina grabbed Mariana and they left together. Carolina shooting me death glares the whole way out. Rodrigo stopped in front of me on his way out and said I was making a huge mistake, that Mateus would never forgive me for this. I told him I didn't care and also my name is Nora. He should learn it since he'll be hearing it in the divorce paperwork. That left Mateus. He was still sitting on the couch looking at me like he didn't recognize me. He asked if I was serious. I said I had never been more serious in my life. He asked where he was supposed to go. I said that sounded like a him problem. He tried to argue, said I was throwing away our marriage over nothing, that his family loved me in their own way and I was being too sensitive. Still with the too sensitive. After everything that had just happened, he was still telling me I was the problem. I asked him to leave. He kept talking, saying we needed to calm down and think about this rationally. I asked him again. He said he wasn't leaving his own home. I reminded him it wasn't his home. His name was nowhere on any document related to this house. He finally stood up and walked toward me. He stopped in front of me and said if I did this, there was no coming back. That his family would never forgive me and neither would he. I said that was fine because I didn't need their forgiveness. I needed my self-respect back. He left. I closed the door behind him and locked it. Then I sat down on my couch surrounded by dirty dishes and leftover food, and I just breathed for the first time in 5 years. That was a week ago. The locks are changed. Mateus has been staying at his parents' house. He's texted me every single day asking to talk. His family has been blowing up my phone, Alice especially. I don't know what happens next. Mateus says he wants to work this out, but he also says I need to apologize to his mother first. I told him that was never going to happen. He says I'm being stubborn. I say I'm being sane. I have a consultation with a lawyer next week to talk about what divorce would look like. I don't know if I'm ready for that, but I also don't know if I'm ready to go back to the way things were. I'll update if anything changes. Update. Okay, so a lot has happened since my last post, and I honestly don't even know where to start. Thank you to everyone who commented and sent messages. Some of you said I was too harsh and should have talked it out before kicking everyone out. Some of you said I should have done this years ago. I've been thinking about both perspectives a lot, and I still don't regret what I did. But I'm also starting to realize how deep this whole thing goes. So after my post, Mateus kept texting me every day like I mentioned. At first, the texts were kind of apologetic, saying he was sorry things escalated and he wanted to talk. Then they got more frustrated, saying I was being childish by ignoring him and that married people communicate. Then they got kind of desperate, saying he missed me and the house felt wrong without me there. I didn't respond to any of them for the first few days because I genuinely didn't know what to say. Kira told me I should make him sweat, that he needed to understand the gravity of what he did, and responding too quickly would let him think he could just smooth this over. I knew she was right, but part of me kept wanting to pick up the phone and call him. 5 years together doesn't just disappear because you're angry. There's still this pull, you know? This habit of wanting to share things with him, wanting to hear his voice. I had to actively fight against it every single day. His name is Carlos, and he was very straightforward about everything. He said since the house is solely in my name and was purchased before the marriage with my own savings, it's considered separate property in Virginia. Mateus has no legal claim to it. He said the marriage was short enough and we have no kids, so divorce would be relatively simple if both parties cooperated. If he wanted to fight, it could get messier, but he didn't see what he'd be fighting for since I don't have significant assets beyond the house, and neither does he. I told him I wasn't sure I wanted a divorce yet, that I still loved him somewhere underneath all the anger. He said that was normal and I should take my time deciding, but I should also protect myself in the meantime. He suggested I keep records of communication and not let him back in the house until I knew what I wanted. That Saturday, Mateus showed up at the house. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard the doorbell, looked through the peephole, and there he was, standing on my porch. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in, just stood there in the doorway and waited. He started talking immediately, saying he knew he messed up and he should have talked to me before his mom made that announcement. He said he'd been thinking about it all week and he understood why I was upset. He said his mom had been pressuring him for months about moving in, saying she was lonely now that his dad was working longer hours, saying she wanted to be closer to her son. He said he kept putting her off, but she wore him down, and he figured it wouldn't be that bad, that maybe having her around would actually help me and her bond. I just stood there listening, and the more he talked, the angrier I got, because he was still framing this as a misunderstanding. Like the problem was the surprise announcement and not the 5 years of his family treating me like garbage while he did nothing. I told him the announcement wasn't the problem. The announcement was just the final straw. The problem was that his mother cropped me out of my own wedding photos and he told me not to take it personally. The problem was that his brother had never once used my name in 5 years and he said it wasn't a big deal. The problem was that his sister invited his ex-girlfriend to every single family event, including our engagement party, and he told me I was overreacting. The problem was that they spoke Portuguese specifically to exclude me from conversations, and he called me paranoid. He tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I told him I had spent 5 years trying to earn the approval of people who decided they hated me before they even met me. I told him every time I brought up how I was being treated, he made me feel like I was the problem, like I was too sensitive or too demanding or too American to understand their family culture. I told him he chose them over me every single time, and I was done being the person who came last. He stood there for a minute not saying anything. Then he said I was right and he was sorry. But here's the thing. He said he was sorry like someone says they're sorry for accidentally bumping into you. Like it was a minor inconvenience he was acknowledging so we could move on. There was no real weight to it. No understanding of how badly he'd hurt me, just words designed to get him back through the door. I asked him what exactly he was sorry for. He said he was sorry I felt excluded and sorry his family could be overwhelming sometimes. I felt excluded. His family could be overwhelming sometimes. That's not an apology. That's minimizing. I told him that wasn't good enough. He asked what I wanted him to say. I said I wanted him to acknowledge that his family actively mistreated me and that he enabled it. I wanted him to say those exact words. He couldn't do it. He kept trying to soften it, saying his family had their own way of showing affection and they didn't mean to hurt me, saying his mom was protective and his sister was still sad about the breakup with Mariana, saying Rodrigo was just socially awkward and didn't realize the name thing was hurtful, still making excuses. After everything, standing on my porch after being kicked out of my own house and still defending them. I asked him why Mariana was at every family event. He said she was still close with Carolina and it would be weird to exclude her. I asked if he ever considered that it might be weird for me to have his ex-girlfriend at every holiday. He said he did think about it, but he figured I would get used to it eventually. Get used to it. Like I was supposed to just accept being uncomfortable forever, because his family didn't want to let go of his ex. I asked him something I'd always wondered, but never had the courage to ask before. I asked if his family ever said anything directly to him about me, about not wanting him to be with me, about wanting him to get back together with Mariana. He got really quiet, and that silence told me everything. I pushed harder. I asked what they said. I asked what his mother said specifically. He finally admitted that when we first started dating, his mom told him I wasn't right for him, that I was too different, too American, that I wouldn't understand their family values. He said Carolina had asked him multiple times over the years if he ever regretted ending things with Mariana. He said even Rodrigo once made a comment about how much easier things were when Mateus was with someone who fit in. Someone who fit in. 5 years of being treated like an outsider, and his family had explicitly told him they didn't want me there. And he married me anyway, but never told me any of this. Never warned me what I was walking into. Never defended me when they acted on those feelings. I asked him why he never told me this before. He said he didn't want to upset me. He said he thought if he just gave it time, his family would come around. He said he loved me and he didn't want their opinions to ruin what we had. But their opinions did ruin what we had, because he let them treat me like an unwanted guest in my own family for 5 years while he knew exactly why they were doing it. I told him I needed time to think. He asked if he could come inside to talk more. I said no. He asked when we could talk again. I said I didn't know. He asked if there was anything he could do. I told him he could have done something 5 years ago. He could have stood up to his family. He could have set boundaries. He could have chosen me, but he didn't. And I didn't know if there was anything he could do now to fix that. He left, and I closed the door and just stood there shaking, because part of me had always hoped that his family was the problem and he was just caught in the middle. But now I knew he wasn't caught in the middle. He was on their side. He always had been. He just didn't want to admit it. The next few days were rough. I kept replaying that conversation over and over, kept thinking about all the times he told me I was being too sensitive when he knew his family had explicitly rejected me. All the times he could have told me the truth and let me decide for myself if I wanted to keep trying. But he didn't give me that choice. He let me walk into a losing battle and then blamed me for losing. Wednesday, his mother showed up at my door. I was working from home and I heard the doorbell and assumed it was a package or something. I opened the door and there was Alice standing on my porch with her arms crossed and this look on her face like she was the one who had been wronged. She didn't wait for me to say anything. She just started talking, telling me I had embarrassed her in front of her entire family, that she had never been so humiliated in her life, that I had no right to kick her son out of his own home, and she wasn't leaving until I agreed to let him back. The audacity of this woman, standing on my porch, at my house, demanding that I let her son back in like she had any say in the matter. I told her this wasn't her business. She laughed and said her son was absolutely her business. I told her this was between me and Mateus, and she needed to leave. She said she wasn't going anywhere. So I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. If she wanted to have this conversation, we were going to have it, but she wasn't coming inside. She started going off about how I had always been difficult, how I never tried to fit in with the family, how I made everything about myself and couldn't just be grateful that they accepted me at all. She said in Brazil, family comes first, and I clearly didn't understand that. She said Mateus deserved better than someone who would throw him out over a misunderstanding. I let her talk. I let her get it all out. And then I said, okay, let's talk about fitting in. I asked her why she cropped me out of the wedding photos. She said she already explained that. I said no. She made an excuse. I wanted to know the real reason. She got flustered and said she just wanted pictures of her son. I asked why she couldn't have pictures of her son with his wife. She didn't answer. I asked her why Carolina invited Mariana to my engagement party. She said Mariana was like a daughter to her. I asked if she ever considered how that might make me feel. She said I was too sensitive. There it was again. Too sensitive. I asked her directly if she ever wanted Mateus to be with me. She didn't answer for a long moment. Then she said she wanted Mateus to be happy. I said that wasn't what I asked. I asked if she ever wanted him to be with me specifically. She finally said what I'd known for 5 years. She said Mariana was perfect for Mateus, that they understood each other, that Mariana came from a similar background and respected their traditions. She said when Mateus started dating me, she hoped it wouldn't last. She said she prayed he would come to his senses and realize what he had given up. So there it was. 5 years of her treating me like garbage, and she finally admitted why. She never wanted me. She spent our entire relationship hoping I would go away. I asked her if Mateus knew she felt this way. She said of course he knew. The whole family knew. They had discussed it many times. They all agreed that Mariana was better for him, but he was stubborn and wouldn't listen. Discussed it many times. The whole family sitting around talking about how they wished Mateus wasn't with me, while I was in the other room probably, or at home waiting for him to come back from family dinners, having no idea that I was the main topic of conversation. I asked her one more question. I asked if she had anything to do with Mateus not telling me about all of this. She looked confused, so I explained. I told her that Mateus admitted you all told him I wasn't right for him from the beginning. I asked if she told him not to tell me. She actually smiled. She said she told Mateus that if he insisted on being with me, the least he could do was not burden me with the family's concerns. She said they were trying to protect me from unnecessary hurt. Protect me. By hiding the truth and letting me spend 5 years confused about why they hated me. By making me think I was crazy for sensing their rejection. By letting me blame myself for not being good enough when the reality was they had decided I wasn't good enough before I even had a chance. I told Alice she needed to leave. She started to argue, but I was done. I told her that she had spent 5 years treating me like an outsider, and now I knew it was intentional the whole time. I told her that her son enabled this behavior because she asked him to. I told her that whatever happened with my marriage was between me and Mateus, but she was never welcome at my house again. She called me ungrateful. She said I was destroying her family. She said her son would never forgive me and neither would she. I said I could live with that. I went back inside and texted Mateus. I told him his mother just showed up at my house. I told him what she said about the whole family hoping I would disappear. I asked him if he had anything to say. He called me within 30 seconds, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk yet. He texted asking what exactly his mom said. I told him word for word. He said she was exaggerating and it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. His mother literally just admitted they all talked about wanting him with Mariana, and he's telling me it wasn't like that. I asked him what it was like then. He said his family had concerns, but they got over it. I asked how exactly they got over it when they were still inviting Mariana to every event, and his mother was still cropping me out of photos. He didn't have an answer for that. I told him we needed to have a real conversation, not on the phone, not through text, face to face. He asked if he could come over. I said no, not at the house. I suggested meeting at the park near our neighborhood the next evening. Neutral ground. He agreed. He said he'd be there. Tomorrow, I'm meeting him at the park. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if he's going to finally wake up and realize what he did, or if he's going to keep defending his family until I have no choice but to walk away for good. Some of you asked about Mariana and whether she knew about all of this. Honestly, I don't know and I don't care. She's not the problem. She's a symptom of the problem. The problem is that my husband's family rejected me from day one and he chose to hide that from me instead of either defending me or being honest so I could decide if I wanted to stay. I'll update after the park conversation. Wish me luck, I guess. I have a feeling I'm going to need it. First update. Okay, this is the last update because honestly, I don't think there's anything left to say after what happened. So I went to the park to meet Mateus like we planned. It was cold and getting dark, and I almost turned around twice on the walk over. But I needed this. I needed to look him in the face and hear what he had to say when there was nowhere to hide. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench near the entrance. He stood up when he saw me, and for a second he looked like the man I fell in love with, tired and sad and desperate to fix things. But I reminded myself that this was also the man who lied to me for 5 years. We sat down and he immediately started talking, saying he'd been thinking about everything I said, saying he knew he should have handled things differently with his family, saying he wanted to make this work. I asked him what making it work looked like to him. He said we could set boundaries with his family, see them less often, maybe skip some holidays. He said his mom was upset, but she'd get over it eventually. I asked if his mother getting over it meant she would stop hoping I'd disappear. He got quiet. I told him that boundaries weren't the issue anymore. The issue was that he'd spent 5 years knowing his family openly rejected me, and he never told me. He let me think I was the problem. He let me feel crazy for noticing their hostility. That wasn't something we could fix with fewer family dinners. He started getting frustrated, saying I was being unfair, saying he was trying to protect me, saying if he had told me everything from the beginning, I probably would have left and he didn't want to lose me, so he lied to keep me. He made a choice to deceive me, so I would stay in a relationship I might have walked away from if I'd known the truth. That's not love. That's manipulation. I said that to him exactly. I said, you didn't protect me, you trapped me. He stood up from the bench and started pacing, getting agitated, saying I was twisting everything, saying his family wasn't that bad and I was making them into villains, saying Carolina just missed her friend and Alice was just protective and Rodrigo was just awkward. The same excuses he'd been making for years. I told him to stop. I told him his mother had literally admitted she hoped our relationship would fail, that his whole family discussed wanting him with Mariana, that they were glad when they thought I might leave. That wasn't being protective or awkward. That was intentional cruelty. And then he said something that made everything click into place. He said maybe if I had tried harder to fit in, they would have accepted me. Tried harder. After everything. After knowing what they did. He was still blaming me. I asked him what trying harder looked like. Learning Portuguese even though his mother called it an invasion of privacy. Being nice to Mariana at every holiday. Smiling while his brother snapped his fingers at me like a dog. What exactly was I supposed to do that I hadn't already done? He just kept saying I was being dramatic and this wasn't worth ending our marriage over. That's when I saw the car pull into the parking lot. Carolina's car. And Alice was in the passenger seat. Mateus saw my face and turned around. He looked genuinely surprised, but I didn't believe it for a second. I asked him if he told them we were meeting here. He swore he didn't, but someone must have because here they were. Alice got out of the car and started marching toward us with Carolina right behind her. I stood up because I was not going to have this conversation sitting down. Alice started yelling immediately, saying I had some nerve demanding to talk to her son alone after what I'd done to their family, saying I had humiliated her in front of everyone, and now I was trying to turn Mateus against them. Carolina was nodding along, saying I had always been jealous of their close family, and this was my way of breaking them apart. I looked at Mateus waiting for him to say something, to tell them to leave, to stand up for me just once. He didn't, so I did it myself. I told Alice that she could say whatever she wanted about me, but she couldn't change the facts. That she had admitted to hoping my marriage would fail. That she had spent 5 years treating me like garbage because I wasn't Mariana. That she had told her son to hide all of this from me. She started sputtering about how I was twisting her words. Carolina jumped in saying I was manipulating the situation, and Mateus just stood there watching like it was a TV show. I turned to him and asked point blank, are you going to say anything or are you just going to let them attack me? He told everyone to calm down. That's what he said. Not that his mother was out of line. Not that Carolina should back off. Just that everyone needed to calm down. I was done. I told him that I had spent 5 years waiting for him to choose me and he never did. Not once. Not when his mother cropped me from photos. Not when his sister paraded his ex in front of me. Not when his brother refused to use my name. And not now when his family showed up to ambush me at what was supposed to be a private conversation. I told him I was filing for divorce. That I'd already talked to Carlos and we were moving forward. That he could send someone to pick up his things from the house but he was never stepping foot inside again. Alice went insane. Started screaming that I couldn't do this. That I was ruining her son's life. That she would make sure everyone knew what kind of person I was. Carolina was on her phone, I assumed texting the whole family about what was happening. Mateus finally stepped toward me and grabbed my arm. He said I couldn't just end our marriage like this, that we needed to talk more, that I was making a huge mistake. I pulled my arm away and told him not to touch me. I told him the mistake was marrying someone who would never put me first. I told him I was done talking and done waiting and done hoping he would change. Then I walked away. They kept yelling behind me. Alice screaming that I would regret this. Carolina saying something in Portuguese that I didn't understand and didn't care to. Mateus calling my name over and over. I didn't turn around. Not once. Let them stand in that parking lot screaming at my back like the unhinged people they are. That was a week ago and you want to know what's been happening since? Mateus won't stop. Texts every few hours, voicemails at midnight, showing up at the house and ringing the doorbell for 20 minutes straight until my neighbor threatened to call the police. He keeps saying we need to talk, that I'm throwing away our marriage. 5 years of being invisible and now he wants to see me. Now he has things to say. Where was this energy when his mother was cropping me out of photos? And his family. Oh, his family. Carolina posted a throwback photo of Mateus and Mariana with some caption about real love and loyalty. Alice shared some quote about how American women don't understand family values. They treated me like dirt for 5 years and now they're the victims. You know what Alice texted me yesterday? She said Mateus is devastated and I need to stop being selfish and think about what I'm doing to him. To him. Like he's the one who suffered. Like he's the one who sat through years of being excluded and mocked and erased. I texted back 2 words. Lose my number. She called me a word in Portuguese that I looked up and yeah, it wasn't nice. I screenshot it and sent it to Carlos for the file. Here's what I know now. I wasted 5 years of my life trying to earn love from people who decided before they even met me that I wasn't good enough. I twisted myself into knots trying to be perfect for a family that was never going to accept me. And my husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner, watched it all happen and told me I was too sensitive. Well, guess what? I'm not sensitive. I'm awake. And I'm done apologizing for having basic self-respect. The divorce is happening, and every single one of them can choke on their family loyalty, because I am not the one who betrayed anyone here. Crop that out of your photos, Alice.